Welcome back to the Cash Flow Show. I am your host, Christian Carrillo. I'm super excited for our interview today. I think it's going to provide a lot of golden nuggets, especially for individuals that may be looking to enter the small business or real estate space and looking to scale, or for those just starting, right? Our guest is truly an expert. Our guest, Mickie Kennedy, is the founder and president of eReleases, the small business leader for press release distribution, which is now celebrating 22 years in business. He is an expert at helping small businesses increase their visibility and credibility, and he's here today to share some valuable insights. Again, Mickie, we're super excited to have you on. Thank you so much for hopping on.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, why don't you get us started with a little bit more about who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Right. So I'm originally from North Carolina, and I went to Northern Virginia for graduate school and pursued an MFA in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry. And I ended up in a job as employee number 3 at a telecom research startup. And one of the things they wanted me to do was figure out press releases for them and to get media attention. And so I was able to do that, taking data and numbers and finding out what the real story is. And I really realized what the journalists responded to. And I was faxing at the time. And journalists started to call and say, could you just email us these press releases? Because there's a lot of data and it's better to just copy and paste it. And that was a light bulb that went off. And I said, how about if I see if people will let me just send press releases to them? And so I reached out to journalists and spent about a year compiling a database and launched about a year later after that with around 10,000 journalists in my database, that I just was a matchmaker, sending press releases on behalf of clients to specific journalists.
Wow, I love that. I always find it amazing when people sort of maybe take a leap, right, to add value in the marketplace that they're seeing out there, right? I think that that's an amazing journey, and definitely one that I think a lot of people are always thinking about. So, Mickie, you are truly an expert when it comes to, I think, visibility, credibility, branding as a whole, right? How do you typically approach that, right? And I'm coming in this from a private equity sort of kind of point of view, where a lot of times people maybe just talk about go out and raise capital, go out and buy more deals, right? And they don't necessarily think about the importance of being out there, right? Having maybe brand equity and for people to be able to see you, find you. How do you typically approach that?
So for me, it's really taking stock of you, your company, who you are, and really doing an audit of what potentially could be an angle that would work with the media. A lot of times people overlook the obvious, like what your story is, what's, a vulnerability or an obstacle you've overcome. How did you end up where you did today? And, I think the important thing is to be authentic. You don't necessarily have to be inspirational. Sometimes just sharing your mess ups along the way makes you relatable. And I know that a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs often try to appear very corporate and professional. And, there's an imposter syndrome at play where they don't feel like they're there yet. And what I'm telling you is journalists respond to authentic stories, you really just being who you are, and understand that at the end of the day, they're gatekeepers and they're trying to determine what is a story that my readers or listeners would find intriguing. And if you can sort of reverse engineer that with what you're sending out, you'll crack the code as to how to get media attention.
No, I love that. And a lot of the work that you may focus on deals with using press releases, right? To be able to know small businesses, authors, startups, companies as a whole, right?
Right.
How do you typically approach that process? How does that work?
Right. So basically what we've evolved over the years that we now include a national newswire with our distribution, PR Newswire. And we also still have email distribution as a component in what we do. But largely what we do is we educate our clients. A lot of the customers that come through are moving press releases that aren't very meaningful or newsworthy. It might be a product launch, which is just here's the product, here's a bunch of features. And as I mentioned before, journalists are story builders, and there's not a lot there to create a story. But if you included a use case study and the results from that and had a quote from somebody based on their experience using your product, you can build a story about that. Here's a new product. This is someone's experience with it. And here are some features and things like that. So it helps to build that arc of a story. And I always say that, when you're working with, doing an audit of what you're about and what could be newsworthy, is to sort of just realize that you're not having to be the biggest or the best, but you just have to sort of really own something specific. Unique selling proposition is something that gets thrown out a lot in marketing, and there's something to it. Some of the clients that have the best results with us are startups, and I think that a startup, generally what they've done really well in order to attract funding and stuff, is know what their elevator pitch is. And they can very succinctly tell you what makes them unique in the industry and how they're different from everybody else. And for that reason, I think that it cuts through a lot of the noise with the media, and the media just immediately gets them saying, yeah, I know what this company is completely about. You can do that yourself. What is your USP? What is it that you do that's a little bit different than everybody else? And it might be the way that you arrange deals. It might be the way that you came into this or transitioned from one industry to another. There's lots of different arcs and stories that you can build. But at the end of the day, I think that that it can be a real edge over anybody else who doesn't really know who they are and what they're about.
I love that. I love that. And I love that you brought up unique selling proposition, right? Because this is actually something I wanted to really drill on and get your expertise on, right? Because if we're able to hone in on our unique selling proposition, you can kind of make your offer irresistible to individuals, to potential investors, to media in general, right?
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I always tell people, what is it that you do that's different than everybody else? And with a lot of small businesses, they say, well, we're really not that different. We're just a reseller of this product. And I'm like, but obviously there's something that probably makes your business a little bit different than everybody else. And if they can't find it, I tell them that's a red flag, not from a standpoint of getting PR, but also from the standpoint of surviving as a business, because just being a commodity out there, it's going to be really hard to grow your company and grow your brand. But one of the things that I point out is Apple products can only be sold within I think 95% of their MSRP. It's a huge restriction so that a lot of people can't compete on price. But there are companies who've sort of, got a differentiator. Some throw a gift card in there, so it's almost like a rebate or paying less for the product. Some will bundle software. Others will bundle hardware. Some will offer next day immediate shipping, or a combination of all of these things. But there are companies that, when faced with a commodity and the inability to sort of differentiate yourself on price, there are other ways to do it and to accomplish what you're doing. Often, if you don't have a USP, one of the best things to do is talk to those that you work with and say, what has your experience been with us? Has there been something that was a little different working with us than anyone else? Sometimes they can sort of put a spotlight on a potential USP that you could then sort of take advantage of and actually grow and foster.
Wow. No, as you were sort of mentioning all of that, I found that incredibly fascinating. I was thinking about it from my perspective as well, right? Like how is my firm different from other firms, right? How can we stand out more? From your experience, how have you seen individuals or firms, companies, startups, etc., typically approach that, right? Because I do agree with that wholeheartedly, where sometimes I'll talk to some of my friends that are entrepreneurs and I'll ask them, how is your company? How is your restaurant different from others? And a lot of times they'll say, well, it's not, it's kind of the same. How can we differentiate ourselves in a way that'll allow us to stand out?
Right. So I think an origin story of, how you came to be your company or you personally is a great way to do it. Just to let you know, eBay for decades had the origin story that it was just a guy wanting to create a website so he could sell, I think, his girlfriend's Pez collection, completely fabricated and made up by a PR person. And yet it probably resulted in over 1,000 articles over years of people sharing that. It was something that was immediately an interesting story. And I'm not saying go out there and lie, but what I am saying is there can't be room to embellish a little along the way. What is something that triggered or helped you along the way? Was it like rubbing shoulders with someone who was really important, and it was just in passing, but yet it made a meaningful impression on you that caused you to go down a certain path? What is it that made you the person that you are, or made your company the company that it is? And so I just say, again, do a deep dive audit. A company's story isn't just one person either. Talk to employees. Sometimes interesting things that happened with people who are just rank and file within the company can generate a history that you can take advantage of.
No, I think that's amazing. That's amazing. And one other item where I'd love your thoughts, because I think our listeners would get a lot out of this, is credibility and using PR, right? And then how they intersect and help us gain more credibility in the market, get more sales, right? What are your overall thoughts on that, right? Because from my perspective, and we were chatting a little bit about this earlier, is it almost seems like to me sometimes branding and imaging, people kind of put it on the back burner, but it's ultimately to their own detriment, right? Because if there's a company out there that is differentiating itself, it's going to attract individuals, right? So what are your overall thoughts on that?
Right. So I have clients who tell me that, hey, we do a lot of paid advertising, but look at these numbers. Do they make sense to you? And they'll be like, we got these 3 articles, and these were the visitors that came through. Not a lot of visitors, might be under 400 or 500 visitors came from those articles. But according to our results, we got 300 conversions. Is it possible these pages converted at 75%? And I'm like, well, no. But among the people who clicked on the link or did a search and found you, yes, because they were inspired by the article. And the article is like an implied endorsement. It's like third-party corroboration. It's social proof. It is not an ad, and therefore your blinders don't go up and just discount what's there. A lot of times someone will read an article about a small company or a small product. I see a lot of these articles for Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and you go, wow, that's really cool. I want to go support them. And then you go there and then you just buy. You don't open another window and say, can I get something similar, cheaper on Amazon? You want to buy. And so that conversion rate is really, really strong. And what you can do with that is, I often tell my customers, share these articles with your leads and your customers. If you have people that are on the fence about using you, if they read that article and they get that upswell of positive feeling, they're going to be more likely to tip towards using you, and it's going to make it a lot easier. I've actually had, in some instances, clients send pay-per-click traffic to articles that were written about them, even though they can't control any of the tracking on those pages because it just converts so highly. And so there's something that happens with an article, and it sort of breaks down any sort of I guess, restrictions or red flags that we throw up when we look at an ad. And you can't get that anywhere else. It's a very powerful thing, and it works extremely well.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's interesting you bring that up because the previous partnership that I was a part of, we had been featured on Market Watch, and we had a distribution of a couple hundred investors. And for whatever reason, it never occurred to us to send that feature out to our investors. And transparently, maybe less than 10% of all of the individuals in our distro list were actually investors, right? So there were a lot of people that were warm leads, but were on the fence. So it almost makes me think what would have happened had we done that, right?
Right.
No, I think that's incredible. That's incredible. And I know we're nearing the end of our interview here. We typically like to end our interviews with a couple of questions that we pull from our listeners that they want us to ask the individuals that we are interviewing. We call this our quick response round. So if you're ready for it, we can dive into it.
Sure.
If you lost it all today, what would you do?
I think I would go back into PR. I think I might do more curated pitches and be more of like the services a PR firm would offer rather than being a press release distribution platform. It's not that I don't love it, but it's a lot of work. And I think that you lose something when you're not doing the direct pitching.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. As you look back in your life, what are the 2 or 3 things that have helped you get to where you are today?
I think the first one is recognize that I am my own problem. I had staffing issues for years where turnover was average of 1 year. And I brought in a friend who was in a marketing mastermind I was in, who specializes in HR. And she doesn't do this for small businesses, but for me, she did. And she interviewed my staff, interviewed my customers, looked at my job postings and said, yeah, the problem is you. You're a micromanager. The staff just feel like they can never do anything right, and they get frustrated and they just want to leave. And so in April of 2015, I had a meeting, told the staff I'm going home. I'm going to focus on education and marketing. I'm still available, but I'm not going to be, looking over your shoulder anymore. And most of the people that were there, that was 8 years ago, are still there. So
Wow.
I was the problem. The second thing that I've done that's really revolutionized my business is I learned about A/B split testing a long time ago because I do paid traffic. And I just took that concept and said, what else in my business could I apply it to? We used to send a shock and awe package of fun stuff to customers. And one customer said they thought it was unprofessional. So I just split tested, continuing to send that to half of my new customers. And the other half just got a book and a letter welcoming them to the company. And we just looked at their lifetime value over a 2-year period. And the people who just received the book and letter, their lifetime value had already exceeded the others by double. And so I was spending closer to $50 to send a shock and awe package out, and only about $15 to send the book. And I wasn't just costing myself more with the box. I was costing myself a lot more with the opportunities that I was, hampering, because for some reason I just wasn't connecting with people with a fun, little colorful box of goodies.
Wow, no, that's excellent. That's excellent. I love that. What advice do you have to an individual entering the entrepreneurship space or that is brand new to the space?
I have seen a lot of businesses and people fail because they spend so much time, energy, and money to trying to get everything right before they start. I didn't incorporate for 5 years. I just operated as a sole proprietorship. And until I got enough money that it was meaningful to protect myself and, other reasons, did I bother. I've seen people go in complete debt on getting certain kinds of credentials and all these things set up and spending so much on attorneys in the beginning of starting a business. And if you've got a lot of funding, I think that makes sense. But if you're just lean and starting, try to continue being lean and continue that. Count every dollar, make every dollar count.
Yeah, I know those are excellent points. I actually love that you brought that up because I definitely concur. Well, last one here for you. How can our listeners get to know more about you and connect with you?
Right. So the website's eReleases.com. We have chat and phone call availability. You'll only deal with editors. We have no salespeople or commissions or anything like that. The social media is on the lower right of the page. LinkedIn's a great way to reach out to me directly. I talked about doing an audit. I have a free masterclass that sort of does an audit of you and your business according to certain parameters, types of releases, and whether you'd be a candidate for that. And it's completely free. It's eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And it's just one of the education things that we do at eReleases to try to get our clients to do more strategic types of press releases, the ones that are meaningful, the ones that will result in earned media.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. And again, Mickie, thank you so much for hopping on the show today. This was just a wealth of knowledge, and it kind of got me thinking about a lot of the efforts that we've got going on within our firm as well. And I definitely see a lot of gaps. I see a lot of opportunities that we can take advantage of. I see a lot of issues that we may need to address and pivot on, right? So again, I know for a fact that our listeners will hopefully take advantage of a lot of these golden nuggets. And again, I cannot thank you enough for your time today.
Very welcome.
All right. Thanks so much. And we'll chat soon.